Attorney General Merrick Garland appointing Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss as special counsel in the ongoing Hunter Biden tax probe. The appointment allows Weiss to prosecute Hunter Biden in any district he seems fit, rather than just in Delaware. Maria asked Texas Senator Ted Cruz about this on Sunday Morning Futures yesterday. Watch.
Your reaction to David Weiss being named as special counsel here?
He is a wildly inappropriate person to be a special counsel. We should have a special counsel, but number one, we should have a special counsel to investigate Merrick Garland for whether he lied under oath to Congress in response to questioning from me, number one, and whether he committed obstruction of justice. Those are both the allegations that came from the whistleblowers. And number two, we need a whistleblower not to go back and bury what Hunter Biden did, which is what David Weiss has been doing for 5 years. We need a special counsel to investigate Joe Biden and the $20 million that his family received while he was vice president. The allegation now is for official favors that he was selling. That is bribery. It's not a little gun charge on Hunter. It is bribery of the president of the United States is what these allegations are. And this special counsel, he ain't going to do anything to get to the bottom of that.
Joining me now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Alan, good morning. You are also the author of the book, Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. First, I want to get your reaction to those comments from Senator Cruz.
Well, Ted was my student. He was one of my very good students. And I think he overstates it a little bit when he accuses Merrick Garland of lying. There's no confession, no doubt that there was a dispute between how Garland described the role previously of David Weiss and how David Weiss described it to friends. But I attribute that more to a misunderstanding. What I would have liked to find out is what David Weiss actually did, not what he was authorized to do. What did he actually investigate? Did he look into Burisma? Did he look into Ukraine, China, or did he merely satisfy himself by looking at the gun charge, which is a minor misdemeanor, and looking at the two tax charges? I think it was the wrong person to pick for this job. First of all, it's illegal. The regulation provides clearly that special counsel have to come from outside the government for a good reason. What's so special about a special counsel is that he doesn't have to answer to the present administration. He's independent. But if you have somebody who serves at the pleasure of the attorney general, and obviously as the U.S. attorney, he serves at his pleasure, he's part of the administration, that person shouldn't be serving. But it's in clear violation of the regulation itself. And somebody probably has the standing, I don't know who, to challenge this appointment. Hunter Biden would have standing to do it. He wouldn't want to do it. The prosecution would have standing to do it. They don't want to do it. So the question is, who would have standing to challenge this clear violation of the regulation that is binding on the Justice Department?
I want to ask you about, because look, there could be some felony tax charges here. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know why this is going to be. But the statute of limitations issue is very interesting, because now he's running up against the statute of limitations on the tax and the gun charges. So if you think about it, if this is politically motivated, he could push this out. He could, I mean, you know, the statute of limitations can run out for some of these charges. And then as he's doing his quote unquote investigation, the clock runs out, and we're in November of 2024, and we still don't have a report from David Weiss about Hunter Biden. I mean, is this a way to politically, you know, bury this, if you will?
I think we would catch him on that. I've been doing this for 60 years. I never see the statute of limitations run out. As it's about to run out, prosecutors always say to the defense attorney through his lawyers, look, either give us a tolling agreement, let's extend the statute, or we're going to indict you tomorrow. I've never heard of a situation where by accident the statute of limitations runs out. The real question is not necessarily whether justice is being done. For all I know, Weiss is a decent guy and is going to pursue this. It's whether there's the appearance of justice. When you have the son of the president and we have a possible investigation of the president himself, you better be beyond reproach. You better make sure that the special counsel is outside the government as the regulations require. You have to make sure that there's no statute of limitations problem. I have to tell you with great reluctance, because I voted for Joe Biden, and I intend to vote for him again if there are no changes of circumstances. I'm a Democrat. I really do think a special counsel has to be appointed to investigate whether or not President Biden had any connections to his son's illicit dealings. We already have a special counsel looking at Joe Biden for classified material, but the classified material, those are paper cases. That's not particularly important. We have everybody in government has had some classified material problems. But I think there's right now enough cause from these whistleblowers and these other allegations to have somebody outside the government look to see whether or not President Biden had any connections to his son's shenanigans. I hope not. I think not. But it's not my opinion that counts. It's the objective evidence that counts.
Well, the whistleblowers did claim that Weiss actually failed to follow the foreign money trail. I just want to put that out there. But I do want to move on to more legal issues with you. This is a big one. So a fourth criminal indictment against former President Trump could be issued as early as this week. This Georgia grand jury may begin hearing evidence today. Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan confirms he's testifying tomorrow. And then you've got an independent journalist that posted that he received a call from Fulton County DA Fani Willis and has been called to testify, Alan. So this would be the fourth round, the fourth indictment of the former president. I guess where do we stack this up in terms of difficulty for Mr. Trump?
Right. Well, in my book, Get Trump, I predicted all four of these indictments. So far, all of my predictions have come true. I predicted that the court would not accept the Hunter Biden nomination. Very nicely, Mark Levin called me yesterday the Nostradamus of the legal profession, because I've predicted everything correctly. And I predicted the Georgia indictment. If the Georgia indictment is based on the telephone call, it will fail, because the telephone call has to be taken literally. And in the telephone call, President Trump said, I want you to find, not make up, not concoct. I want you to find. Find has a meaning. Find means it's there. It just hasn't been counted yet. It hasn't been found. So if that's the basis for the Georgia case, there's nothing there. If there's more to it, we have to wait and see what there is that is more to it. But I'm concerned this is, again, another effort to try to get Trump. And the problem with the Georgia indictment for Trump is that he couldn't pardon himself for that. It's a state charge, not a federal charge, although it involves a federal election. And that's another issue, how much power the state has really to prosecute and investigate election involving the president of the United States, whether this should legitimately be a federal investigation or whether every state can investigate the federal election through its own grand jury. These are hard legal questions, and we'll wait and see whether he gets indicted. My prediction, he will be indicted in Georgia, as he was in New York and in Florida and in the District of Columbia. In my book, Get Trump, I show that none of those indictments stand up.
And you think that's this week, right? Do you think Georgia's this week?
I think so. I mean, it could be next week, but it will be very soon, because we know that he's a target. We know that there have been testimony against him. So I think it's going to happen very quickly.
Since you're Nostradamus, I wanted to ask you before we run. Alan Dershowitz, it's always great to see you.